Thank you for tuning in to Androna Talks Radio, gathering as one in our sovereign truth from a galactic perspective, exploring our world with new ideas, knowledge, and a promise of a better future. Galactic discussions for galactic-minded people. Androna Talks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Androna Talks Radio. And we are going to discuss, we're going to be looking at Iceland as a model for possibly other ways that the nation can perceive and look at some of the changes that can be made to help their governments run a little better. I know this is a small scale, but let's take a look at it. Just step back, and we're going to provide links and some other information that you can look at. And these are just open discussions, ideas that have come to us. And I have Ian here with me today, and we're going to just go for it. We're going to talk about whatever seems to be current and fresh, and ideas that can maybe spark other ideas and become this butterfly effect to let things roll out. So, hello, Ian. How are you?
Hi, Jess. Yeah, fine, thanks. Yep.
You know, there was a story that years ago. I want to say maybe over 10 years ago. I was, just wanting to do my part, and I used to do work in the community and do videography and little things around the town. And someone had told me about wind energy. And they said that there was going to be a Democratic convention and they wanted to promote it. Would I be interested in videotaping it and help bringing it to the community? And I said, sure, I'd love to. At that time, the Kennedy family, particularly Teddy Kennedy, was a little unsure. The population of the people down in Cape Cod at the time, here I am living in Massachusetts, and this was the city of Hull, if anyone ever wanted to look into it, about what I'm talking about. The area of Cape Cod was, a place where people really vacationed, spent a lot of money to go there and see the views. It was a very beautiful place to go, especially in the summertime. And they didn't want to see windmills in the water. And so what we did was, I got my camera and we went up to a bunch of delegates and had discussions about wind energy, and suddenly a few years later I noticed it became very popular. Now, I was involved with that, other people were involved in it. At the end of the whole presentation, I remember instead of tree hugging, we were windmill hugging, right? So we just wanted to make a statement. And years and soon after that, like I said, they put the windmills. They did put them up around Cape Cod. So someone has to say something. I think my idea of just people underestimate the power of their voice, the ability to actually make change, to underestimate that one person can trigger another idea, which triggers another idea in another person. And in the end, it doesn't really matter who gets credit for it, because it becomes a unified idea of change in a positive way. Because we already know what the negative stuff is. It sort of just happens in the same way, but we never think of it that way. So for some reason or another, we become apprehensive to bring up an idea that is very positive. And it brings in ideas for change. Now, you don't have to beat down the door and you don't have to start screaming about it. Bringing up statistics and the reasons why it benefits and looking at the pros and cons of it. There's so many different ways to look at things. And so, like I said, just, a little wing of a butterfly, it starts things rolling. So I'd like to do that today. have a discussion about Iceland and some of the ideas and the way that they've approached government that should be a model for what can happen if people actually take a look at, make an effort for change, actually perceive and see that things can change in a positive way. What are you think, Ian?
Absolutely. I don't think we need to underestimate our power as a voice. I always remember that quote from, I don't know who it was, either Gandhi or the Dalai Lama. He says, "Don't worry about the size you are. Don't underestimate yourself. Don't think you're so small and unknowledgeable not to create waves." And I think he likened it to sleeping in a darkened room with a mosquito. Yeah, there was a lot happening in Iceland. Iceland's apparently the 18th largest island in the world. About 108,000 square kilometres. 350,000 people live there. And I think at the it was being used as a kind of tax haven by the banks. A lot of people were investing in banks that were based in Iceland because of certain tax breaks and everything. And then it all came to a head in 2000, early 2000, where the economy reeled and they kind of just about saved things, just about pulled things together. But from that, the people were kind of livid at the levels of corruption. And they took matters in their own hands and prosecuted 26 bankers. So they kicked the bankers out. And closely behind those are the politicians who were in the bankers' pockets, and they were kicked out. And now they're working to try and get some kind of stable political system. They're on their fourth prime minister in 2 years now.
That's amazing.
It's nuts. The current one looks kind of like a pretty stable lady, who's called Katrín Jakobsdóttir, and she's 42 years old, and she's from the Left Green Movement Party. And they've had 5 different parties in a couple of years. They keep rooting out, keep finding problems and rooting them out, and they're slowly getting rid of all the draining the swamp, if you like.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what you said. What Trump is, it appears that that's what Trump is trying to do is, and of course it's a much bigger effort when you compare the population in the U.S. to Iceland. But we are looking at, clearing some of these things away. I mean, they dealt with reckless bankers, pedophilia, all sorts of things. And even put their ex-prime minister on trial, didn't they?
Yeah. Because basically they were up to their ears in it. So I think this lady's challenged this new prime minister. She said, my largest challenge is to get a faith back into the political system, because now no one trusts them. And you can imagine that this is a little country like Iceland, and they have to go so deep to kind of root out the corruption. And if you think about kind of really old countries like the UK and the US, you've almost got to kind of take things right back to the bone and start again, haven't you? Because everyone's involved and they're all supporting each other.
Just to let people know, we'll probably put the link in with the show, but this is a BBC article, BBC News, and on February 10th of 2016. The question is, how did Iceland clean up its banks? And some of the things that they're saying here, the banks were 10 times the GDP of Iceland, 20 times the state budget, they were too big to bail out. The stock market collapsed. 80% of the stock market was wiped out overnight. Shareholders were badly hurt. 97% of the banking sector collapsed in a matter of 3 days. He says, and they say, I hope I will not witness this anywhere in the world again. The people felt very down. They were in that big financial pressure, and and then they had to go into court and to really manage and deal with all this stuff. This was one of the biggest cases they had, 22,000 pages.
They had like ethics and financial scandals one after the other, It really all came out. And one of the old prime ministers got caught selling his stock of the banks before before the crisis happened. So it was insider information. And they're just going through the process of like rooting out the rotten apples.
After all of this happened, after they sorted it out, and then, as you said, they went through a few different leaders. They cleaned up the banks. Before the crisis, they had about 500,000 foreign visitors each year. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 years later that I think last year they said 1.5 million people were visiting. So there's a 20% increase every year. So things just started moving in the right direction.
Oh, yeah. I live in Scandinavia. I live in Sweden. And we often hear when we have visitors coming over that they've been to Iceland and kind of enjoying it there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I mean, I visited there last year? Yeah, last year. So much has happened within 1 year. And the reason why I went over there is because I said Rodan's there, which is Odin, right? And I went over there to spend some time with him. He, kept on calling me. I kept on seeing him. I did one of the Andronicus shows. I had a very, very emotional time where I could see he was having a hard time as well. And, he has a very strong link to the northern parts of the planet. He's still very connected to all the Norwegian countries, as well as even some of the Germanic countries, and the UK as well. I mean, it's really prevalent. I mean, technically, the Vikings even were over in the U.S. So, I mean, it's a group of beings that from off-world and who have been here supporting the planet for a very long time. And so I felt his presence very strongly in Iceland. I went over there, and here you have all of this major change. And then something else happened. So I looked in the news and discovered that now they've dealt with the political issues, but now they're opening up in religion, right? They're stepping away from the traditional Christianity, which is, we don't want to do away with anyone's belief system. But what was happening is they were saying anyone that wanted to understand and appreciate or embrace Odin and some of these other Nordic gods, goddesses, or whatever. It's just a term. It doesn't mean that anyone's supposed to worship them, but it's something that if a person chooses to recognize the belief system, that they are free to do so. So we got that article that came out of Big Think. And it says, Iceland is officially worshiping the Norse gods again. The first time since the Vikings sailed, the Icelandic public will soon be able to worship classical Norse gods like Odin, Thor, and Frigg in a public temple built in their honor. So that was, I think that article also came out in February 2015. I thought it was more recent, and I just saw it. But I was here's another thing, that anytime people go to the basic, whether it's a native or indigenous belief system, or whether it's Celtic or something else that's just not of the three groups, whether Christian, Muslim, Judaism, which is fine, like I said, but the whole concept of saying that this is devil worship or this is something really dark, I mean, let's get out of the dark ages and stop labeling things that way.
Yeah, that was just kind of stories perpetuated by the church, isn't it, to stamp out the older religions. To stamp out the older belief systems.
Yeah, I mean, even just when I'm online at times, and I'll do mediumship, connecting to spirits or beings or whatever, and I find people go step back into the dark ages and this archaic belief that I'm talking to demons. And I know this is a fear and a worry, but then there's also, it's a prejudice, and it's a form of censorship that, people are trying to dictate what's going on. I thought we should really acknowledge and look at Iceland as a role model. And it sounded like they went through some, real growing pains out of this.
Mm.
But they seemed to manage, and the people probably had to sacrifice some things in the process. Now, I don't know if there's possibly a better way to do it. I mean, this is like going, cold turkey from a habit or something, and then breaking away, and everything sort of feels a little chaotic, and you're stepping away from whatever that is. But acknowledging and looking at this is really recognized. So according to them, let's see, it's the worship of Odin, Thor, Freya, and the other gods of the Norse pantheon became an officially recognized religion exactly 973 years after Iceland's official conversion to Christianity. That's powerful for a country like that. That is the Viking and I mean, they still acknowledge that they're Vikings. They understand who they are, and for us this is important. I mean, not everyone resonates with the Vikings, but for us this is important, and we understand that the strong connection there. So what's going on here is making this change, and I think, from my opinion, it has a lot to do with what Rodin's presence does when he's in a space, and I think that he wants to do the same for the rest of the world that connects to him, and to bring in this energy. Now, does that mean he doesn't want to be a savior? He wants to just support us to have sovereignty. And I know that, from my communication with him, I understand that this is the purpose. He doesn't want any additional recognition. He just wants people to embrace their sovereignty, to return back to the way that they were. The Vikings were free people. They came and went as they pleased. They traveled. They understood that the earth was there for them. They also respected the earth. So, but the labeling, of paganism and all this other stuff, it seems like they're breaking away from that. When you get to a point when you're talking about whether it's, there's so many people that are psychic now, so many people that are embracing their inner intuition. The inner intuition has a purpose. It's not just a random thing, and everyone has it in different degrees. And it's a type of survival. If we are to move forward as a race, we need to embrace all the aspects of who we are. Now, the animal kingdom uses their senses, the multiple senses, for survival. They can tell when the weather's going to change. They have a sense of whether someone else in the group is in trouble. They learn to tune in more to their inner hearing and outer hearing, and have a stronger awareness. Humans can do the same. There's a break away from technology. We have to spend more time in meditation, spend more time with the earth. If we're going to do this, we have to do this right. And that means that if we're telling the government that we want change and that we're not making any change within our own lives, then we really can't. They really can't tell the difference of what we're saying or doing. We really have to have a sense of knowing that we are sovereign. Otherwise, we can't speak up for our own truth if we really don't know what that truth is. And my variation of truth may be different than yours, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But we can disagree agreeably. Is that the right way to say it, right?
You can say it that way.
Yeah. So this led me to this other topic, which I was thinking about. People may not even have thought too much about this, but many of us who are expressing our freedom to speak honestly, and do, whether it's radio talk or online, like, through social media and so forth, and having the freedom to express whatever it is that we want to say. And we're finding that there are those that are asserting themselves as watchdogs of what people are talking about and teaching. And so, like I said to Ian earlier, I said typically a person will, they'll watch television and say, I don't like that channel, so they change the channel. And YouTube and some other types of media, people become, feel like it's their job to censor what everyone else is saying because it doesn't fit or agree with what they believe. And so the question is, Ian, maybe you can think this through with me.
Yep.
Either these people are working for governments, and they're there, or working for the social medias, and they're there to watch what everyone's saying, or they're working for, for whatever point of view or perspective, a group or somewhere, or else subconsciously the program of censorship, so that they're inserting a type of programming in the average public through the media, through corporations, through mind control, to watch others and what they're saying throughout the free web.
Yeah. This is the age now when all the programming and the indoctrination falls away. And how I see it is, as the truth becomes more evident, people are going to go into meltdown because they've been backing the losing horse, if you like. Yeah, for example, the key areas must be kind of politics, religion, and national identity. With religion, like it's kind of rapidly coming out now that the people who have been kind of telling you that other religions are following demons or kind of or whatever, in fact it's kind of the other way around, and kind of paedophilia is rife, and you just wonder where all this prayer energy, this devotion energy goes. I think the words of the great teachers like Jesus and Muhammad and the Buddha or whatever, these people have always come and their words have been kind of twisted and perverted and used against humanity.
I don't think the teachers actually always did it. When you start looking at some of the teachings were that way. It created a separatism, or or like this Calvinistic thought in Christianity, where you're already condemned, so we already know you belong there and I belong here, and that's the concept of like predestination. For some people that they don't realize. I studied theology for about, I don't know. I read through the Bible about 7 times or so. I don't remember everything. But out of curiosity and my whole journey through life, I did get heavily into studying belief systems and even some fringe kinds of belief system, whether in Gnosticism and so forth. And so you start looking at all these different things, and then you see how a group will take that and then pull out something and magnify it, right, to present a point. And as I said, all of this is fine, but because there was certain emphasis on certain types of teaching, then we embrace all of this as true. But it's humanity taking these teachings and then deciding what is important, what isn't important, and then the bigger problem. Here's the bigger problem. This is us, that's them. Anyone that agrees with me is going to heaven. Anyone that disagrees with me is not. And so now you have this level of judgment. Now, there are many, many things that are discussed, and these teachings are vast. There's a lot of stuff. And then there's even, like with Christianity, even the other books that they never included, like the apocryphal books, the apocryphal writings. And so you have all of this information that creates potential separatism, that creates this whole scenario of good and evil. And something that came up and was very striking to me was the teaching of Zoroastrianism, and most people don't even know who he is. And he showed up, somewhere in the Middle East, and was actually the one who implemented duality. And that teaching actually then was inserted into already existing Judaism and already existing Muslimism. So now you have an insert of another teaching, or another spectrum coming in and merging. Now it really becomes judgmental, doesn't it? So you have this whole duality. This is good. This is evil, but we're all human. Every single one of us has made mistakes. If we're honest, we'll say the truth is that not a single one of us is perfect. And some of the teachings were not all of them, but some of them were extremely hard to master. And because of our imperfection, because we are learning, and through our learning we evolve and grow. But beating anyone over the head or forcing anyone in any way, everyone knows it doesn't work. And what happens when we have duality and we say we're good and they're bad, creates wars. So now we have this whole history of warfare that is usually, I'll say 90% of the time, has something to do with belief systems and culture.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's kind of strikingly obvious now that a lot of people are going through these belief system meltdowns, and they're drastically trying to hold on to the old thought paths, and they'll just attack anyone with alternative viewpoints.
Right. Yeah, that they're trying to oppress those that are trying to bring in some other ideas and solutions, and not feeling confined by being within the box.
So I fear of change, maybe. Fear of not existing because your whole life's based upon a lie or something.
Right. But it's also like the Kabbalah holding on to. We're really hard, and we all can unify in the fact that the Kabbalah is monetizing everything that's related to oil and just kind of preventing free energy and doing all sorts of things, right? And so we all kind of can see big pharma, we can see some of the bigger issues, but we need to also say that, well, how do we come together and understand that everything that we've learned or what we've been told growing up, that we have an opportunity to think outside of that according to what fits within in what we view, as long as we're not harming and interfering with anyone else's sovereignty. And I think that's kind of the key there, is that we're all one, essentially, all being a part of the planet. But if you have a space and I have a space and someone decides that they're going to come over and cross over into my space, these are some of the obvious things. And there was a whole thing about isolated civilizations and how they didn't necessarily have Christianity or Judaism or Muslimism or Buddhism, and yet they knew what was right and what was wrong. I mean, it's innate. It's already there. And there are studies that have been done on it. So why are we making this whole thing into us and them? When we're, if anything happens to the planet, it affects everyone. That's the bottom line. And
really, religion is kind of such an easy way to trigger mass bloodshed, isn't it?
Absolutely.
People really take it to heart. And I've always found it a bit strange how people totally embrace something, even if it means going out and murdering the kind of hundreds of people or such, like, in the name of their particular god.
Right. Well, just recently, that there was that incident in Pittsburgh. And, something, like making mention about the Jewish people, and it was just like, why, like probably people he never met before. So I mean, and then someone's going to say, well, that was a false flag, or whatever it was. Just the idea of it. I think that people need to. We need to be more aware that we're being manipulated by the systems in many, many different ways, not just in one or two ways, but many different ways. And we need to get past the cultural differences, the race differences. We need to get past, so many different things in the whole belief system. And let's get out of the dark ages.
Yeah, kind of just leave that kind of divide and conquer in the past where it's supposed to have gone.
Right.
It's time to kind of help each other and mutual support and yeah.
The question is, what can happen if people just start loving the earth again, being mindful of others, that not that we're here to be everyone's keeper but that we can understand that each human life has value, and it's just a basic, very, very simple basic thing, and that we can step away from certain constructs of belief and not be afraid, even though it can be uncomfortable. Like Iceland's shown that this can be a very uncomfortable thing, to step away from something that we're accustomed to. People they like patterns. They like something that gives them a part of a structure and what they're familiar with. And even if that's a church structure, or if that's a bank that you're familiar with, even though there's things going on, or a government way of doing things, and being willing to let go of it, because there's potentially a better way, and we think that we're so tied into these things that there'll never be another way around it, and that's not true. So be more open-minded, not in just one way, but all areas. And I think that's going to make a difference. If it happened in Iceland, it can happen elsewhere. And as we can see, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the U.S., everybody's being challenged, and even the stock market went down in China. So even those that have the money, are going to still have the ups and downs. So we're going to have to figure out some systems here. And, if they wanted to bring in something like, Nasara, Jasara, whatever it is that changes the system and distributes the money in a way that is not, completely a small elite group that's dictating everything, we need to understand that something might become a little uncomfortable. And not to say that we want, I've heard people say, oh, they're going to have to shut down the whole entire web, the internet, everything. And when I hear that, I think that's definitely not a solution. Because, we never want to be out of communication with people. Because then that kind of isolates again, puts many people in a vulnerable situation. And I said anyone that is supporting that, I strongly disagree. And not only that, I see it as a mild form of manslaughter. And let me explain. If people are shut off from communication, for some people, that lifeline could mean that thousands of people are in situations where, whether you shut off a grid, where there's car accidents, people can't get to the doctors, and all sorts of stuff can happen, where it becomes like a state of emergency and so forth. So that is not a solution. And I've had arguments with people about this, about, oh, we need to shut down the grid so the star people can fix it for us. And I'm like, what, if they can't fix it without shutting down the grid, then I don't think they have any ability whatsoever. Because technically what I've seen with like the Council 5 and some of these others, that they don't go about things in the way that humans think of. They know how to change things energetically and to create subtle changes where it's not severely disruptive and not everyone is in pain and begging on the streets for food because, or not able to drive because there's no gasoline, or whatever it is. But we need to be open for changes in a way that is that the grid's not shut down, and that's something that there is a clear communication and the process is done in a sensible way. And I believe that can happen. And here is a perfect example of it happening.
Agreed.
So where do we go from here, Ian?
I'm just hoping that the initiative in Iceland, I can see how hard it is for them to get right back to basics because the corruption's so deep. And then I see, I think about other countries and how with larger populations, more history, if you like, and kind of thinking how hard a job that's already underway now. I know, but it's going to be a complicated job to get right back to the nitty gritty and drain that swamp. But luckily, it's underway now.
Well,
So I'm just. I think it's a great time now, isn't it? With lots of changes. I think we've got to expect these kind of meltdowns of different personalities as these new realities come in.
Well, I have a question. You're a resident right now in Sweden, so they're talking about bringing in more and more people that are looking for, I don't know if it's political asylum or what are immigrants coming in, by the droves. What is going on there, or is there anything that, why is there such a heavy burden on Sweden?
My understanding of it is that Sweden's got a finite economy. There's only 9 million people. It's quite a big country. There's a lot of space here. And they've taken a good number of asylum seekers in the past, and people who want to kind of start a new life or whatever. But this is forced immigration, you know, the same forced immigration that you're seeing in Europe, and soon accelerating in the US, I hear, as well. But what it was, Sweden tried to embrace it, and they came up with all these novel ideas of housing refugees. They had like cruise ships. They had big cruise ships that the government rented and had everyone on there, and kind of motels and hotels and kind of those kind of module buildings that you kind of put together, pods and things like that, pod houses. And but what they found that there was some of these refugees were weaponized. They'd been through the equivalent of kind of monarch camps and things like that, and they were hidden in with the normal kind of displaced asylum seekers from the war-torn countries, and then there were so consequently there was an unknown amount of these weaponized immigrants in with the normal immigrants, and that's why they closed the borders. Well, it was too many to handle, and they were just trying to force them through and overwhelm each country. As you can see, it's happening in Europe. There was this weaponized element who would just go crazy, you know, and involved with a lot of murders and rapes, and to generate fear and start civil wars and things like that, you know. And I think Sweden's handled it pretty well. They've had all kinds of uproars from. At first, the Swedes are very tolerant, and they're open-minded, and they're very forgiving of people. But I think when it comes to a certain point where there's an attack on your nation, which basically this was, and it is on kind of any other nation, because it's an initiative inspired to destabilize Europe, and they just closed the borders, like along with a lot of other countries, and. So yeah, Sweden's still reeling from that, and I think the EU are trying to force them to take more, but at the moment, you know, they've got a very good case not to.
Well, you know, I had a discussion with Peter the Insider in one of my interviews with him, and he mentioned Norway, which is the neighboring country to Sweden, and the discussion was that the UN and other nations look at Norway, who is very, very self-sufficient. You know, they have their whether it's their
oil,
they have oil. They also have fishing industry. I mean, everything that they need is right there. Plus, they have a magnificent landscape. And so they said that the agenda was to tear them down. Instead of allowing these nations to stand on their own feet, and then they're more apt to help out or you know, present a model on how to create, you know, an environment that is self-sustaining. I mean, that doesn't just happen. You have to really sort through and think things out, and how are you going to make it work? You know, there's different nations that have different ways of dealing with things, and throughout Europe. I've been through Europe a little bit, not in all the nations, but I understand their concept. And you know, if you look at the U.S. too, it's what you do with the land. I mean, there are nations that have very little land but use it very efficiently, and figure out ways where people can live, in a humane situation and have adequate water and not feel like they're, put in like sardines. And, you have the American cities that, in some locations, I mean, they're really packed in there. And then you have all this expansive land. It's like, what was anyone thinking? Why is it that every time we bring in immigrants, we try to see how many we can pack in to the cities on the coast, and we never think of utilizing the interior of the country? I mean, it's almost like it's something that no one ever thinks about, and so the efficiency of everything makes sense, and then not to be a burden on others, or to have it together and help out others. But then there's a point of where it becomes blatantly obvious when they're trying to destroy and break down. And it's just like anything. If you want to destroy nations that are already self-sufficient and are working well on their own, they're not a burden on anyone else, and if anything they can help, then why destroy them? What are they gaining?
Yeah, well, it's kind of one. It's easy to roll out the kind of the one world government, isn't it? And kind of one. It's an easy way to break down the individual country identity. This is why there's so much rise in kind of nationalism now, because they know that without that, the whole country was going to be overrun, and the whole essence of who you are as a person, and and the ancestors of the land and everything would just be gone,
Yeah, and so people are then taught that they need to be ashamed of what their cultural background is. Actually, it's like you said, it's neutralizing who we are, and then bringing us down to a number, because that's the end of it, isn't it?
Yeah, you haven't got your own space. You're used to the kind of people you live with. This is not from a racist point of view. I'm sure that the people who are being forced off their land in these other war-torn countries and made to come to Europe, they don't want to be there. They'd sooner be in their own country, but the kind of powers that be choose to destabilize them, and it was totally on purpose, for a reason.
Right, and like why don't they help these nations rebuild?
That's not the objective.
Take that money. Right, it's not.
The objective is to kind of destabilize and kind of push the people out into someone else's country, because that's the best way of overtaking that country.
Creating chaos.
Yeah, and fear.
Fear.
And so you can't trust you don't know the people. You haven't got this neighbourhood, and I've seen small towns and villages here that have been the same for like hundreds and hundreds of years. All of a sudden, there's kind of groups of young guys from other countries, like hanging out in these really sweet, like little towns, and it changes the whole feeling,
Yeah.
Kind of a lot of women can't really go out as they used to because they don't. It's a different culture. And it kind of adds an unforeboding feeling to your own town and your own county and country, So you can't really relax. I felt that. Yeah, I've not actually lived here for long, but you can see it and feel it that the people who have come here like asylums through forced immigration, not the ones who've been here a number of generations, because they're kind of intended to settle and kind of make a living for themselves. But the ones who come under these plans for forced relocation, it's it's kind of terrible for both parties.
So I think the bigger issue is these are not normal people, everyday people. These are not neighborhood people that are being brought into nations as immigrants. These are gangs.
It's mainly kind of young men. It's almost like an army.
Well, yeah, it's gang. Well, in the U.S., I think the big issue is the military, and then there's gangs. So, why are they deliberately bringing in gangs? And those, I guess there was an article in Tennessee. There was a whole bunch of these gangs from South America. Young guys hanging around.
Yeah, that's dangerous. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're trained. Some of them they're trained killers.
Yeah. In Sweden, I seem to remember that they had a lot of unaccompanied children, and they came in under a lot of secrecy. And I thought, why is that? And then when you see them get off the buses, they're in their 20s. Beards and things like that, and everyone's clapping them, and they're unaccompanied children. And you think, these are like, they're kind of military types as well, They're like children.
Yeah, it's something is definitely going on, and we can put our heads in the sand, we can look the other way, or we can take note of it and see what's actually happening, and it's something
I think Scandinavian countries have realised that something was up and they closed the borders.
Yeah, try, and then they'll call it a civil war. They have these people come in from another nation and call it a civil war. Ready for war. And that's all they know. I mean, they were groomed for it.
Yeah, I mean, traumatized through it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that all immigrants obviously are not.
No, of course not. No.
Yeah, and that's if anyone wants to pick apart this discussion, that is definitely not our topic. Our topic is what the agenda is with some of the obvious things that they're doing, deliberately bringing in killers and criminals.
And actually, who's actually behind the manipulation of the movement of people as well?
Yeah.
It's not the most of the people's fault who are being displaced from their countries, and what's the plan behind that? Syrians and things like that, or having their country, the towns and cities blown up.
Why are we blowing up their cities? Why is Mexico and South America so poor? Why do they have rulers that perpetually take money from their people? What happened to the consciousness of humanity here? And why is it that you've got some beautiful country in South America, really, really beautiful. Why is it that they're in such disrepair financially? None of this makes any sense. And so people need to start looking at things and like I said, think outside of the box. Don't just think about what the media is saying. The media is giving you a part of the information. There's more. There always will be. And don't all be easily manipulated about whatever's being said. Now, the people that listen to our YouTube channel, we usually don't get into politics or anything like that. But today, on this program, this is not the Andronicus Transmissions. So we're going to be talking about all different types of topics, and there'll be different guests. All sorts of things are going to be covered. And for today, we just want you to think about some things that have been on my mind. Ian and I have had these discussions as well as many others. So let's make the world a better place. Let's start speaking up, not just to change things, but to introduce new ideas. And I do believe in the highest potential for humanity, which Andronicus reminded us of. And those that don't know what that is, look at the YouTube channel where you'll see all of the symbols that he gave us to hold on to, our highest potential. And that is that we have, the governments that are run in a way where there's more of an equality financially. And I'm not just like promoting socialism. I'm just talking about that, this whole monetizing of everything, and thinking that we don't need all of the materialistic stuff that we think we need, and just simplifying life, going back to what is really basic, and considering that we're part of this universal group of beings called humans, as well as we have our guests here too, because everyone knows we have our ET friends, and some of them are living amongst us as well. And so we're just going to be in harmony, and we can do this if we can just step out of the paradigm and not be so locked in. So easier said than done, true, but it has to start somewhere. So with that said, I think we said all we needed to say for today, and I want to say thank you to Ian. And any last thoughts?
I see this as being like a really exciting time, like a shake-up time. It's like when when everyone's shadows come up to be looked at and addressed and acknowledged and accepted. So there's going to be a lot of turbulence before we move into that calm area, I think. But it's great that it's here, because it means that things are moving and changing and moving in the right direction. As long as we keep looking at kind of the real deal and not get sidetracked by the kind of many illusions that are offered to us.
Well, I think, maybe if we all brought Rodan into our country, maybe he can help us out like he did with Iceland. It's a start. It's something that we can look at. I mean, he is the one that's looking at the galaxy and kind of watching over a lot of things. So that's one idea. And like I said, I think in the end, Iceland feels like they've made the right moves. They changed their country into a struggling nation into one that's really doing well, and actually probably bringing in some money. They got some really cool ideas there too. You drive on those roads and they have that you never, it's naturally plowed, right? It just has that undercurrent of heat from the volcanic stuff, a beautiful landscape. You should go out and visit. Maybe you'll kind of feel a little bit of the sovereignty there. So, but with that said, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we will continue on sharing Indrona Talks Radio.
You have been listening to Indrona Talks Radio. Join us on YouTube channel Jessica Errol Morocco, and visit her website at www.readingsbyariel.com.